Hello and welcome, my name is Matt, and today I'm going to be walking you guys through building a simple weather app in Flutter. This app is going to query the OpenWeather REST API and then retrieve the data and then display it on a Flutter app. So my environment setup is that I'm using macOS 11 Big Sur. I'm using Visual Studio Code as my IDE, and I have both the Dart and Flutter plugins installed. If you don't have VS Code set up the right way, this may not work too well. So you can go to the flutter.dev website and then learn how to set up your environment correctly there. I'll put a link in the description. You can also get your OpenWeather API key for free. I'll leave a link to that in the description as well. All right, let's get started. So I have VS Code open here, and I'm going to go Command-Shift-P to bring up the command palette. I'm going to type in Flutter New Application Project. When I hit Enter, then it will allow me to save it somewhere. I'm just going to put it on my desktop for now. And then it gives me the ability to name my project. You can't use any uppercase letters in this, so I'm just going to call it Weather, all lowercase, and hit Enter. This will now create a new Flutter project for me. You can see VS Code in the bottom right is now kind of building everything that I need to build this Flutter project. And on the left side in my Explorer, I have a bunch of files and folders that have been auto-generated for me. If we go into the lib folder, we can open up main.dart, and this is our main Dart file that we're going to be using to build our app. Let's go ahead and run just what Flutter gives us automatically when we start up the app, because there's already some code in here. So if we go to the Run tab on VS Code and click Run and Debug, it will sit here and think for a second, and then it will launch our simulator. If everything worked correctly and you have your environment set up the right way, this is what you should see. You should have the Flutter demo homepage, and every time you click this button, it will increment this counter one time. Let's jump back into VS Code. If we open up main.dart, this is the first screen that the user sees when they open up the app. We're going to be building our own UI, so we can remove a bunch of the code that's already in here. On line 34, you can see class my homepage. We're going to actually remove this entire class. So starting from line 34 all the way down to the end, we can just remove all of that. We're also going to remove some comments in here just to clean it up a little bit. Perfect. Let's create our own custom class. So in VS Code, if we go to the Files tab, we can hover over where it says Weather at the top of our Explorer and hit the New File button. Make sure that you still have main.dart selected. So when we hit the New File button, it will put our new file in that same directory. We're going to call this one currentweather.dart. Hit Enter, and it will create that new file for us. What we're going to do is we're going to first import the Flutter material.dart library. Import package Flutter material.dart. We are now going to create our own stateful widget class. This class is going to be called current weather page. In here, we're going to override the create state method and then pass in our own current weather page state class, which we're now going to create. Let's walk through this code and understand a little bit more about what is going on here. First, you will see that our current weather page state extends the stateful widget class. This allows our current weather page state to adapt to change and update the interface with those changes. The create state method is then called, which will create the mutable state for the current weather page state widget. We then define the current weather page state widget, which contains the build method. This method is the cool and fun one. The build method will return a tree of widgets. Right now, there's a scaffold widget, a center widget, and a text widget. This is what each of them does. The scaffold widget contains fields to create sections for widgets, an app bar, a body, floating buttons, drawers, or side menus. Center will center the widgets within that widget. The text widget will display text. Let's now create a model to store data. In the Project Explorer, I'm going to hit the new folder button and create a folder called models. Inside of this folder, I'm going to hit the new file button and create a new file called weather.dart. This will create a new file for me. and open it up. In this file, we can define a class called weather. Inside of the class, we're going to create 5 variables, one for temperature, one for what it feels like, one for the low, one for the high, and one for the description. All of these variables will be final. Flutter has a unique and powerful notation for creating a constructor. Instead of having to pass in variables and assign them to your local variables within the model, you can just create a constructor as such, which will, in fact, do the same thing. We are now going to create what's called a factory. This factory will allow us to pass JSON into the model to then generate an instance of this weather class. Let's build some widgets. Back in currentWeather.dart, let's add the following method. Let's look at this method. The first thing you might notice is this red squiggly underline. If we hover over it in VS Code, we can see this error. There's a quick fix option, and if we click that, we can import the missing Dart library that we created before. Perfect. Looking at this method, you can see that it returns column widget. A column widget stacks its children vertically. Its children are 4 text widgets, one to display the temperature, one for description, one for what it feels like, and one for the high and low temperature. Let's add one more method to our currentweather.dart file. If you are familiar with REST APIs, this code should be pretty easy to understand. But if you're not, here's a quick rundown. Upon running the code, the app will make what's called a GET request to the URL that we have specified. The OpenWeather server will recognize this and return the data that we want. Along with that, it will return a status code. If it is 200, then all is well and we got the info we wanted. If it is not, then that means something went wrong and we have to show an error to the user. Some important things to notice about this method are that 1, the endpoint that we were querying will get the current weather for the specified city. You can see that on line 37. I put in Calgary. 2, it's asynchronous. We ensure that by using the async keyword in the method definition. We will still have to implement what happens if the status code is other than 200 is returned, here on line 46. And we are missing the HTTP package, so this code will error, and you can see that by hovering over this red squiggly underline on line 41. Let's add the missing packages. Flutter uses the pubspec.yaml file to manage packages. Let's open it up. On line 27, we can add in our missing HTTP package. We can say HTTP : and then the version number that we want. When we hit save, VS Code will automatically run flutter pub get, and this will install the missing packages. Let's navigate back to currentweather.dart. Here we can import our missing packages. Let's make some changes to our build method. I'm going to remove this text widget and paste in this code. Let's go over the new widgets that we added. The first one here is the future builder widget. This widget allows async methods to be called and for the UI to be updated when the async method is done. This is determined by the line if snapshot is not equal to null. We also have a circular progress indicator widget. This is a simple spinner to show the user that something is loading. You also may notice this line here, future get current weather. This line calls our async method to load our weather data. Head back to main.dart. In here, we still call our my homepage class on line 17. We no longer need that. So let's take this out and instead call our current weather page class. Hitting save. Let's run a project and see what we got. I'm going to head to the Run tab and click Run and Debug. If you did everything right, this is what you should see. Congrats, it works. But let's spend a little bit of time making the UI a little bit nicer. So let's go back to VS Code. And inside of our currentweather.dart file, we have the weather box method. In here, this is where we create our UI. So what we can do is change some text attributes. So what we're going to do is we're going to change the text attributes of the main weather.temp text widget. Let's make it center aligned, make it bold, and make the font size much larger. Let's say 55. Let's add some spacing around each of these text widgets. To do that, we can wrap each of them inside of a container. In VS Code, there's a handy shortcut where you can right-click on a widget and say source action, refactor, and then wrap it within a different widget. We got a bunch of options here, but we are going to do a container. And ta-da! Our text widget is now wrapped in a container. We can also add a margin property to this container. And to a margin property, we pass an edge inset property widget. We're going to do edge inset.all and give it a value of 10. Cool. Let's do that for the rest of these widgets. This is what your method should look like now. If you run the app, it should look something like this. We're almost there, but let's center all of these text widgets. We can do that by adding a property to our column widget. The property we're going to add is called main axis size. And we're going to give it a value of main axis size.min. Hitting save and running our app. This is what our weather app looks like now. Much better. Make sure to check out the blog linked below, which will give a little bit more detail on some of the things that we did here in this video. Have a great day.